Our webinar today is entitled Fundamentals of SAP Recipe Development in PLM 7.02 and is jointly sponsored with SAP. This webinar will review SAP's Recipe Development solution and its latest released capabilities. SAP Recipe Development 7.02 solution is now more flexible than ever, and you will see how you can control many aspects of recipe and label development within the SAP environment. We will discuss capabilities of SAP Recipe Development with a demonstration of some of the new functionality, cover real-world experiences gained from implementing several client projects with process industries, and address questions that several clients have had in moving from recipe management to recipe development. My name is Alan Mendel, Vice President at LeverX, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin our topic for today's webinar, let me briefly introduce you to LeverX. LeverX assists companies increase business value by leveraging existing investments in SAP solutions. LeverX is an SAP services partner and associate member of the PLM Alliance. LeverX delivers strategic, functional, and technical services in the areas of SAP Product Lifecycle Management, Portfolio and Project Management, and related solutions. We offer business, process, and strategic consulting, solution architecture development, implementation planning and execution, application management support, on-site and remote delivery models. In addition, LeverX provides services for mobile application strategy development and implementation, as well as a broad set of SAP technologies, including SAP NetWeaver, Workflow, Business Warehouse, and Business Objects. We are pleased to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Dan Bender, Solution Management, SAP Recipe Development from SAP. Anil Kaked, Senior Principal Consultant for LeverX. And Hector Velasco, Senior Principal Consultant at LeverX. Our webinar agenda will proceed as outlined. SAP's strategy and why SAP Recipe Development is important by Dan Bender. Then an overview of the demonstration for today's recipe development will be given by Neil, and we'll follow up with a demonstration implementation of SAP Recipe Development by Hector. And then we'll end the webinar with some questions. If you have questions along the way, please post those in the question panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, so with that, we'll send the presentation over to Dan. And Dan, please go ahead and share your presentation when you're ready.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. Hi, everybody. As Alan pointed out, my name is Dan Bender. I work for SAP in the role of solution management. The simplest of all terms, solution management for SAP is the conduit between the field and the development organization. So my responsibilities include working with customers, consulting various different elements of the field, and understanding their needs and translating those into technical requirements that our development team therefore implements. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just giving you a very, very brief introduction to how we got the Recipe Development 7.02, what some of our influences have been, and why we've taken the approach that we have in terms of our development approach. So the first thing we'll look at is what are some of the focuses that we've had in terms of developing recipe development. There's three primary focuses that we've really focused on, or we've really had as a basis for the development of recipe development. One is the need for product compliance. So product compliance, and especially in the process industries, has always been there. But I think what everybody would agree upon is that compliance continues to be a major function and a major focus in how people do the development of new products. So you need to consider that as part of your development cycle. And let's face it, we're all working in a greener planet every day, so these compliance requirements will continue to get more challenging. There's also a component to this that really affects a lot, often the CP industries or those that work directly with the consumers, and that is the expectations that customers or consumers, or your customer's customer, if you will, has in terms of information. So you look at some of the large organizations and say, well, I'm really interested in, what kind of plastics are you using in your packaging, or what kind of, how much sodium is in your product, or are you doing something to reduce the fat content, or things like those. So there's more to product compliance than just the pure regulatory side. There's also the reporting component. Second major function, globalization. We've blamed everything on globalization for the last 15 years in the software space. The reality is, though, is that our customers are expanding, whether it be their customers that are expanding, meaning that they're selling to a broader audience, or their development is expanding. This is true of essentially almost every customer. And really what this means is that you really have to focus in on what is the most optimum way of doing development across this broad spectrum. And this really kind of falls into some of the very traditional PLM requirements. The single source of the truth is a good example. One way of doing things so that I can efficiently and effectively manage that product development process across that very diverse set of requirements and that very diverse set of people involved. The third critical component is the overall complexity. The expectation is that you are going to do the right thing the first time. So a lot of basic things that have been always a challenge within the product development world continue to be a challenge. For example, we found that it's anywhere from 90 to 95% of all new product development, and this of course is a generic statement across multiple industries, but 90 to 95% continues to be actually the rehashing of an existing idea. So taking a product that perhaps already exists and adjusting it accordingly. So if you're in the food industry, perhaps I want to create a new lower fat version of an existing product. If I was in the chemicals industry, I want to do something that eliminates the use of a certain ingredient because it's found to be ecologically sensitive. Things along these lines. So it's really about using that intellectual property and doing it very, very effectively. Adding into the components of it, of all those compliance requirements, makes this process a very challenging one, and therefore it's very important that you manage your data set effectively.